to get a pizza.
2 boys have died after being stabbed in Bristol last night.
It's heartbreaking, heartbreaking.
His dressing gown is on the bed and you could see where he got undressed to go out that night. And I just so wish he just put his pyjamas back on and just stayed in.
This is an attack on 2 children, committed by children. In all my years as a police officer, one of the most horrific weapons I've seen. This is an investigation that will live with me and my colleagues for the rest of our careers and our lives.
What we are told is that one of the boys was living on this street, so it really has hit people here hard.
I managed to sit down in front of him and he knew I was there. He knew I was with him. But he was so pale. He was very pale. He just kept saying to me, "Mum, I want to go to sleep."
Try and keep the kids. You try and keep your child safe. But obviously, someone, took him.
Because summer's here and a kiss, we're ready to...
Mason was just like the sweetest kid ever. He would always make me laugh. He's just like a silly kid. We'd do like prank videos together. And like just typical brother-sister relationship. But he took it always the next level and he would always have to try and go a step ahead and try to like make my day just full of fun. We always grew up close. From the moment he was born, I was like infatuated by him. I was obsessed with him. I wouldn't want to stop hugging him. And he was just really sweet and so pure, and his heart is so kind. And it's really rare in life you come across people that are that nice and loving. We had a bond that I can't even explain.
Max was 16. He was a great character. He was always full of laughs, joking. It's very rare he was angry or annoyed, and even if he was, after 5 minutes, he would be back to his normal self. He was loud, clumsy, very tall, but he was also very kind, gentle, very loving, very respectful. He was just a beautiful kid. He was definitely a mama's boy. If he was sat on the sofa, he would sit on the arm of the chair and put his legs over me. And he's 6'2", so trying to sit on my lap, that's what I miss about him a lot, because it was the closeness. He would give me a cuddle, never embarrassed to give me a cuddle. I loved him to bits, I really did. He was my boy.
Max and Mason grew up in South Bristol in Knoll West. They were best friends, going through nursery, juniors and secondary school together.
They both joined us when they were in year 7. That was back in September 2018. Mason, he gave his all in his subject areas and particularly enjoyed art, where he was very, very talented. And he enjoyed his food technology. Then Max loved his football and he was more into his maths. And he had a flair for maths. I know I taught him.
They were just a good team. Like Mason was the quiet one, Max was the loud one. So I think Max brought Mason out of his shell. It was just a nice friendship.
Both had loving families. Max was the youngest of 4 and Mason the youngest of 3. During the pandemic, Mason's dad, Shane, died from COVID. Mason was just 13.
Me and his dad was very protective of Mason. He never went out Mason. He was just PlayStation mad. I think Mason was playing the PlayStation when he was 3. But I thought, well, if he's in the house, he's safe.
Always on the PlayStation, always chatting to each other on the PlayStation. What I would give to hear his voice now, shouting down the PlayStation.
Nikki was going on a rare night out with friends. Before she left, she tried hard to persuade Mason to order a takeaway.
If he'd have just said to me, I go, all right, Matt, I'll get that McDonald's now, I think this would have happened. And this is why I think, I wish Mason, I sat there and think, Mason, I wish that you would have just, that poxy PlayStation, instead of saying, oh, I'm on a game, I can't play, I'm busy. If you'd have just said, oh, to his mate, hang on a minute, I'm going to get an Uber, I'm going to get McDonald's delivered, I'll be back online in half an hour. If you'd have only just said that, this would have happened, because he wouldn't have got out. This is the thing, he wouldn't have got out.
Just a few streets away, Max was also at home with his mum and her partner.
Trevor come down to go and get a drink of water, and he passed him on the stairs at about 20 to 11, and he said he was coming down to feed the cats. So he came down, fed the cats, and then he was in his dressing gown, so he wasn't even dressed.
By now, Mason was hungry, so he messaged his best friend. It was around 11 when Max sneaked out.
That's the saddest thing. When he left the house, he locked the dog in the kitchen, and he took his key with him, he took his phone, and he didn't know that would be the last time he'd walk out the house.
Mason was quick to answer the door, every second caught on the CCTV cameras outside his home. There's a car in the street. It passes them. At the wheel, 45-year-old Anthony Snook, with 4 teenage passengers armed with a sword and machetes.
So I think weapons is probably a more accurate version than knives, because these weapons are, in fact, one of them is a sword. It's a sword that is intended to cause serious harm. It's a horrific weapon. Probably in all my years as a police officer, one of the most horrific weapons I've seen.
Max and Mason don't notice the car, but everyone in it is watching them. It makes a U-turn at the end of the street and comes back. Suddenly, the 4 teenagers jump out and chase the best friends.
The boys ran for their lives, and sadly in doing so, suffered those injuries. Chills me to think of it. Horror, shock, fright. They must have been absolutely petrified.
In the panic, the best friends become separated, ending up on different sides of the street. Mason is on the far side, seen running past the white van. It was 2-on-1, 17-year-old Riley Tolliver and a 14-year-old attacking him. Mason is trying to get home, but collapses just meters from his front door. 16-year-old Cody Westcott and a 15-year-old chase Max. Cody stabs Max, but the other boy won't stop, chasing him around this white car. Max manages to get away, but it's too late. He's already dying. The attack lasted just 33 seconds.
A car pulled up outside my house, and Max's friend was shouting out, "Leanne, Max has been stabbed." And I said, "No, he's not, he's in bed." And then it hit me. So I was screaming for the door, someone to open the door, and they literally drove me straight down. I said, "Max, Mum's here." He heard me, he opened up his eyes. He said, "Mum, I just want to go to sleep." It was nice to know that he knew that I was there, even though that he was dying, and I knew he was because I could tell. He was just so pale. He was cold.
Well, I had a phone call from Mason's phone, and it was the police on the phone, and I thought, is this some sort of wind-up? You know, it's like, oh, this is, you know, the police, you know, and son's been injured. The whole road was sort of taped up, so I had to get through a lot of tape, and it was just lights everywhere. It was all a bit of a blur. It was just a bit... Well, no one told you nothing?
I was just going to bed and Nikki phoned up, and all she said at the time was, Mason's been stabbed. That was all. He's at the BRI.
I think one of Mason's friend at school, his mum, she gave me a lift to the BRI, which was the same hospital that Shane died in as well.
I walked into this room not knowing where I was going, and there was quite a few doctors, nurses, police in this room, round a bed.
I kept saying, what's going on? And, oh, we'll get you an update. So I was expecting them to say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and do this and do that. Well, they didn't. They sort of stared at you, Mason's mum. I said, yeah. And they said, we're so sorry. And that was basically it. And so I walked out. I went, really?
I said I wanted to see him. So they let me go in and see him. And I was just in shock. I couldn't cry. I just gave him a kiss and gave him a cuddle. And that was it, really. I went into, I suppose, shock.
So it was literally when we got to there, they allowed us to go and see him. They were still working on him when I walked in the room. And then they stopped. That was hard. It was so hard.
By the early hours of Sunday morning, at two different hospitals across the city, Max and Mason had both died, within 15 minutes of each other.
Remember it vividly. It was a Sunday morning, or it was the Sunday morning. It was around about 8:30, and my vice principal called me, and she said, Vic, I've just got off the phone to Leanne, which is Max's mum, and all she could say was, he's gone.
We come home and the whole road is cornered off, so you can't get in, you can't get down the road. And I just saw my brother's coat in the middle of the road, and I knew it was his coat because it was his favourite coat, but it was all like ripped up. And I ran straight to his room to see if he was there, because I was like, yeah, he's definitely there. And then I opened the door and he wasn't there. It's like, I was just like, I couldn't figure out why he wasn't there.
Best friends, innocent schoolboys murdered on their doorstep. But why? It was all about revenge. An hour earlier that same Saturday night, there was an attack on a house 3 miles away. Bricks had been thrown, the woman inside, a mother, was hurt and had to go to hospital. Her son was Cody Westcott. He wanted revenge. He gathered his cousin, Riley Tolliver, and 2 other boys who we can't name because of legal reasons. Anthony Snook was friends with Westcott's mum. He was their chauffeur. Convinced people from Max and Mason's neighbourhood were behind the attack, Snook drove them across the city from Hartcliffe to Knoll West.
Every day I go through what were they thinking, looking at their actions, looking at the way they drove around Knoll West, trying to find a victim. It's obvious that they were intent on committing serious harm to anybody they could get their hands on. And I think, they armed themselves with weapons. They hunted around the estate to find, sadly, those 2 boys, and they attacked them for no reason whatsoever.
After they stabbed the boys, they jumped back in the car, tyres screeching, leaving Max and Mason dying in the street. Within minutes, they're home, but panic. Getting rid of evidence, a fire is lit and they burn their clothes, trying to hide the knives before going out for food.
And chillingly for me, what we do know is They even stopped off at McDonald's after attacking these two boys. I think it speaks volumes, really. Two beautiful boys lost their lives and they went to McDonald's for an early morning breakfast.
The police wasted no time trying to find the killers.
So this attack happened at 11:15. It was a very, very quick attack, 33 seconds in total. The first call to the police came 4 minutes after. Within 10 minutes, we'd identified that vehicle. Within 59 minutes, Anthony Snook was in custody. Once we had Anthony Snook, we had a foundation for the investigation, and we just built from there.
Mr. Snook, can you just listen to my colleague a minute? Is that okay?
Hello.
Anthony Snook has just been arrested.
So I'll be placing you under arrest for murder, 1 count of murder, so you don't have to say anything.
But en route to the police station, they get a call from the hospital. Mason has died.
So the circumstances are still the same. Your vehicle was linked to where the stabbing has taken place, and subsequently someone has been murdered, all right?
Then a second call. Max has now died.
Before we get out, you're further arrested for another count of murder, okay? So you don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when.
Snook admitted he was the driver, but said he had nothing to do with their plan.
So I mean, they're screaming in the car at me, stop. Didn't know they were going to jump out, didn't know any weapons was in the car. I had no intentions, so none of it. I didn't have any idea of it. And I was abused that they put me in that situation, you know?
The 4 teenagers were unknown to the police. We didn't get to interview Anthony Snook until sometime on a Sunday afternoon, but he wasn't forthcoming and giving us any names. By the help and support of the community, we were able to narrow it down quite quickly. We were able to identify certainly 2 of the individuals, and then good old-fashioned detective work led to the other 2.
Today, 2 boys aged 15 and 16 were arrested on suspicion of murder.
They knew we were coming and we weren't going to stop until they were in custody. A number of doors, countless doors, a number of addresses were searched, and we were simply chasing them down until we found it.
Righty, listen fella then, all right, so time is
4 days after Snook was arrested, there was a knock on the door for the oldest boy, Riley Tolliver.
Do you say maybe just listen, all right?
Yes, of course,
So just
By the end of the week, all their killers had been caught.
Has received naming you along with others as being responsible for the murders of Max Dixon and Mason Wrist on Saturday 20.
This is an attack on 2 boys that were unconnected, 2 children that were unconnected, committed by children. You know, in my police service, thankfully I'll never have an investigation like this to investigate again.
"300 people gathered and roads were closed as hundreds of balloons were released in memory of 16-year-old Max and 15-year-old Mason.
Bristol was a city in shock. In the days after their deaths, there were spontaneous gatherings on the streets.
This world is never ever going to be the same without
4 days on, Max's mum, Leanne, addressed the crowds.
And I don't want anybody else to go through what I've going through and what Mason's mum is going through. But I just wanted to say thank you, and I do appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, and I'm just... Thank you.
It's that big word, the big M word, murder. They were taken from us. We wasn't prepared for it, mentally prepared, which is very, very difficult.
At the boys' school, the pupils held a spontaneous vigil.
That period after the deaths of the boys, I have to say, have been some of the most challenging periods I've had to deal with. It's one of those things that you're never trained to know how to cope with. You know, nobody prepares you to say, when you're standing up to lead an assembly to share the awful news that 2 of our young people have been tragically murdered, and you're partway through a message and you're overcome with emotion.
Well, Ashton Gates is paying tribute to Max Dixon and Mason Rist.
And Bristol City and Leeds United football fans came together to remember them. On the 9th of October, the trial began. All 5 were charged with 2 counts of murder. 3 of the group were children. The prosecution said the group were on a joint mission, acting as a pack. When they saw Max and Mason, they thought they'd spotted those responsible for the earlier attack on the house, or at the very least, people connected with it.
I don't know what was in their heads. The boys were completely not connected to any offences that took place in the Hartcliffe area. So to my mind, absolutely a case of mistaken identity.
The court heard how Mason, who was stabbed once in the back and then in his chest, suffered unsurvivable injuries. Max was stabbed once in his abdomen and had instant severe blood loss.
I'm a human being, I'm a parent. These were 2 boys going about their business. They were boys just out being friends. But these boys were cut down in the prime of their lives, and that's a horrible word to use. But they were attacked with swords for no reason whatsoever.
After a trial lasting 5.5 weeks and 3 days of discussions, the jury came back.
Today at 6, 4 teenagers and a man in his 40s are convicted of murdering 2 teenagers in a case of mistaken identity.
Max's mum Leanne had her head in her hands as the verdicts were given. Mason's mum Nikki cheered as the first one was read out.
We thank the jury for having to see what we've seen, and we thank them for coming to the correct decision as far as we as a family are concerned.
There are no words to express how thankful I am to everyone. I will be forever grateful to them. It's just, I wish we didn't have to be here today, but we've got some sort of justice for our boys. So thank you, everybody.
Snook was first to be sentenced on the 19th of November. Today, Snook remained emotionless as the Honourable Mrs. Justice May sentenced him to a minimum of 38 years in prison.
He was the car driver. He could have made decisions that would have effectively stopped this from happening. He drove those 4 individuals, all armed, trying to find victims. For me, he is so influential on the decisions made. He was the adult that could have changed the course of this incident.
Snook will probably die in prison.
It doesn't matter if someone gets 50 years, 100 years or 2 years, it's not going to bring him back. These people have still got their life. I think, personally, you know, you do a life is a life, which means that you, whatever age you are, you've committed that murder, you go in there and you die in prison. You don't ever come out.
On December the 19th, the rest of the group were back in front of the judge. Riley Tolliver had turned 18, Cody Westcott now 17, and a 16 and a 15-year-old. We can't reveal their identities because they were too young, but the judge did decide to name Westcott as he was the main ringleader.
How scared Mason and Max would have been being chased by 4 boys they didn't know, boys who were carrying those long knives. Mason being stabbed and dying outside his front door where his mother has to walk every day.
The 16-year-old was told he must serve a minimum of 18 years, the 15-year-old at least 15 years, Riley Tolliver and Cody Westcott a minimum of 23.
Nothing can bring Mason and Max back. No sentence which this court passes can lessen the sense of loss and grief caused to their families, nor does it represent in any way the value of those young lives.
Cody Westcott waved to Max and Mason's families as he was led away.
Today, Riley Tolliver, Cody Westcott and 2 other teenage boys were sentenced to 2 life imprisonment each. Collectively, with Anthony Snook, they will serve a total of 118 years. This is a desperate case with no winners. 4 children will spend the rest of their juvenile life and most of their adult life in prison. And 2 families will not celebrate Christmas with their sons.
I'm still very angry with them, but I still think they're lucky because they're alive. Their family can get to see them, they can get to talk to them. I've not got that privilege anymore. It's justice, that's what they deserve, but it still doesn't take away my pain.
I don't know life without him, so now I'm in like new territory. I go into his room and he's got like a dressing gown that smells just like him. Like his headset is there, his like controller's there, he loved playing his game, and life just feels unfinished. It feels like it's not done yet for him. It's still like that's not it for him. Like he's gonna come back and play his game, do his coursework, and it's like he's on holiday somewhere, like he's had a break and he's gone somewhere, he's coming back.
I don't think there was one person in this building that wasn't affected by it, even when you just think 2 members of our team aren't here anymore. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're a year 7 who potentially has never met Max and Mason or come across them. They're still part of Team John Williams, and we're 2 players down.
I talk to him sometimes. Yeah. I say, what do you think of this, mate? What should you think of him, you know? You're never going to forget him, are you? Ever.
I would rather have had they took my life, because if they said to me tomorrow, sorry, no, you need to go, Nikki, and we need to bring Mason back, I'd happily go.
It's hard. It's very hard. I don't feel like I'm a mum. I feel like I've lost being a mum, if you know what I mean. I'm trying to learn who I'm going to become, because obviously that person before Max is gone. I'm learning to live without Max. I'm learning to take one day at a time. I think the only good thing is, because Max was such a great character, full of life, and we had that bond, I know that Max would want me to get up every day and go out and make a good life for myself and enjoy it, and not sit and dwell on what's happened. I'm lucky I had 16 really good years with him, and I loved him very much, and I still love him very much.
When police arrived at the scene, they found a body of a woman that had been badly beaten.
She had numerous injuries, more than 20 in total, mainly to her head.
She was covered in blood. It was a shocking sight.
She'd been battered to death. It looked like there'd maybe been a burglary.
The house had been ransacked.
The fact that this has happened in broad daylight, at a time when people are taking their children to school, it strikes fear throughout everybody.
A lot of people are scared living around here.
You just can't believe that it's happened.
The big fear is that our community is then under threat.
In the heart of the East Midlands lies historic Lincoln.
It's just got a wonderful, timeless feeling to it, Lincoln. We are a place of great historical interest. We've got everything, castles, cathedrals. There's a great many medieval churches, and there's a great waterway in the centre as well, the Brayford, established by the Romans. So we are a good tourist destination. And people like the fact we're not overly commercialised. We just think it's a wonderful, vibrant place.
And in recent years, Lincoln has become increasingly popular with overseas students.
The university, which is a huge university and, well, pretty much world famous, they've got colleges as well. Well, there are a lot of students, and a lot of the students are foreign nationals, many from the East Asian area. There is a nice mix.
To the south of Lincoln, on the River Witham, lies the suburb of Sincil Bank.
Sincil Bank area of Lincoln is a very tight-knit community, being adopted by the students and working-class Lincoln folk. A stone's throw away from the football ground, it does have a very villagey feel. You will see children playing football in the street.
The Sincil Bank community is very diverse. I've been a resident my whole life, and we have a lot of people that are from different ethnic backgrounds, and because we're so close to the university and stuff, we do get a lot of uni students coming to live down here, especially now that the university is getting more popular. We also have a lot of elderly people. We always try and find a way to build that community together. It's more like a village. People are always supportive of each other.
It's just a nice, friendly place. Everybody knows everybody on the street and everybody chats with everybody. All the kids play out together. It's got a proper community vibe.
It's very close to the South Common, which is the major green area in the south of Lincoln.
You know, there's a lovely park there where people go and walk their dogs and can go and sit. So you have got the nice, idyllic, peaceful park. It's only a short distance away.
But the peace is shattered on one summer's day. At 12:20 p.m, police are called to an address in Sincil Bank.
When police arrived at the scene, they found a body of a woman that had been badly beaten. She had appeared to have been beaten with a blunt object.
The crime scene is secured.
The police came, they cornered off the streets, they weren't allowed anywhere near houses and stuff. No one really told us what happened.
A murder investigation is immediately launched, and it's not long before the body is identified as 29-year-old student Mingzi Yang. But who is Mingzi, and how had she become a victim of such a brutal murder?
Mingzi Yang was originally from China. She came to the UK in 2008, and she was studying English at Lincoln College. Initially, she lived in the Humberside area, and in 2012, she moved to the address in Sincil Bank, where she lived with her partner, who she'd met fairly recently, Darren Grundy, and her young 5-year-old son.
Mingzi's son was from a previous relationship, but Darren quickly became part of the family.
As a couple, they were engaged to be married and were due to get married the following year.
But on the 17th of June, Darren had grown increasingly worried throughout the day when Mingzi failed to answer her phone.
He'd gone to work and he'd been trying to get hold of her throughout the day without any success. So he left work early and made his way to the address.
Darren arrives home and makes a shocking discovery.
He found a scene of devastation, really. It looked like it had been ransacked. It looked like there'd maybe been a burglary. There was a lot of blood in the address.
and he discovered Mingzi's body.
And then he raised the alarm and the police were contacted.
As the police begin their investigation, they need to establish what Mingzi's last known movements were on the day of her murder.
Detectives will use a phrase sometimes that says if you find out how a person lived, then you'll find out how they died. It's about building up a detailed picture of that victim, because somewhere in there might just be the answer as to why this has happened and who's committed it. On the morning of the 17th of June, she'd gone and took her young son to the local primary school, which was a very short walk away, and returned to the address.
The killing was believed to have taken place in broad daylight, early in the morning after school, although the body wasn't discovered until Mr. Grundy raised the alarm.
The question is, who could possibly have wanted to harm Mingzi?
First thing that would go through my head is to try and establish exactly what has gone on.
The initial mystery for the police was that the house had been ransacked. There had been a burglary, and that possibly an intruder had killed Mingzi Yang.
News that a possible burglary has turned into a murder sends shockwaves across the local community.
There was fear and a sense of shock, because it's not something that happens with frequency in Lincoln at all. And the big fear is that our community is then under threat.
I remember hearing about it. My mum and my dad told me about it, and it was very upsetting. It's very traumatic knowing that it's basically on your front door. You know, you could go to sleep at night and something bad could happen. This could have been my mum, or this could have been my sister, or this could have been a relative that lives across the road.
Everybody was massively scared of what had happened because it was so close to home. It's 2 minutes away from the pub that I run, so that day customers were coming in absolutely shocked and stunned with all the police cordons. It just is unheard of around here. You just can't believe that it's happened.
There was a genuine fear from people who lived in the local area that a burglar or intruder was at large and had carried out such a devastating crime in broad daylight. Neighbours were obviously concerned that this could possibly happen to them.
In the Lincoln suburb of Sincil-Bank, the community is shocked to hear of the murder of 29-year-old mum, Mingzi Yang, who has been beaten to death in her own home in what looks like a robbery gone wrong.
She was a local student. She'd got a child. We just couldn't believe that somebody like her had been killed.
And the fear on the streets is growing.
A lot of people are scared of living around here, knowing that something really bad's happened, and it's on your front door.
The first feeling is one of shock, and then wanting to know really what had happened, was the public at risk.
When something like this happens in the community, there's a massive impact. There's lots of children and families in this area, so to have something so tragic and awful happening on your doorstep, it strikes fear throughout everybody.
That's all we were talking about. Everybody was just in utter disbelief that something like that could happen so close to home.
And a lot of them would have been friendly with Mingzi Yang in any event, so apart from the personal impact, you really do get a build-up of tension throughout the community. People feel understandably frightened. Who's committed it? Why have they committed it? Are they going to come back and do it again? If it is a burglary, is our house going to be the next target?
With such a brutal murder happening on a busy street, police are taken aback at the boldness of the crime.
Mingzi had a young son who had been dropped off at school, and the killing was believed to have taken place sometime between about 9 and 10 a.m.
The fact that this has happened in broad daylight, at a time when people are taking their children to school, in a place like this, which appears quite peaceful and tranquil, is actually quite shocking.
The idea that an intruder had managed to get into this house unnoticed and carry out this killing was obviously very frightening for local people.
With the attack suspected to have occurred early in the day, police reach out to the locals for any potential information that may lead them to Mingzi's attacker.
You're really looking for witnesses, Something that's happened like that with so many injuries and so much devastation within the house would presumably have made some noise. You know, had she been screaming and shouting for help? Have the neighbours heard or seen anything?
In a case like this, in an area like this, the community are absolutely vital. They are the eyes and ears, and they're going to know things and see things that the police will never get to find out about. So it's really important to get out in amongst the community and make yourself visible and ask those important questions, because just by being here, you may be approached by a member of the public who tells you something that in isolation might seem quite minor, but actually, when you put it together as part of a jigsaw puzzle, it could actually help to solve the case.
Local reporter Richard Van Plu is also on the scene.
The first time I became aware of Mingsy's death was when the police put out a press release saying that the body of a woman had been found. Killings like this, obviously in rural areas, don't happen every day, and people are quite rightly shocked. And sometimes when you arrive at the scene, people will talk to you. It's their main way of dealing with what's happened.
But so far, door-to-door inquiries have uncovered no leads to Mingsy's attacker. With the fear in the area growing, forensics arrived to examine the scene.
When I arrived at the scene, it was a shocking sight. Mingsy was face upwards and she was covered in blood. She was in the main living room. There was large, pooled, smeared blood staining on the carpet all around Mingsy's body. There was a white radiator near where Mingsy's body was found, and there was spots of blood spattered onto the white radiator. The smears and pools of blood along the carpet had indicated to me that she'd been assaulted at one end of the room, and she was on the floor crawling towards the kitchen in an attempt to escape. The blood spatters on the radiator and on the adjacent wall indicated that as she was crawling along, she was being hit with the blunt instruments repeatedly.
Post-mortem results then arrive, which further adds to the horrific nature of Mingsy's death.
A post-mortem found Mingsy's injuries were quite severe.
She had numerous injuries, more than 20 in total, mainly to her head. She also had, interestingly enough, some defence wounds, including a fracture to one of her hands, which clearly indicated that she'd been trying to fend the attacker off. But the actual number of injuries and the nature of those injuries were very, very severe and would only ever have resulted in one thing, which was her death. She'd basically been battered to death.
But as police scour the scene and surrounding areas, there is no sign of the murder weapon.
The weapon used was believed to be a very hard, heavy, blunt object. But interestingly enough, it wasn't recovered from the scene, which suggests that potentially the offender may have possibly brought it with them, but certainly taken it away with them, which does suggest a degree of premeditation and planning and the realisation, even in the moment of everything happening, that actually they might have left some evidence on that weapon.
Police start to suspect that their initial theory, that Mingsy disturbed a burglar who then attacked her, could be wrong. This is reinforced when detectives examine Mingsy's possessions.
Burglary is normally where somebody goes in and steals something. Sounds fairly obvious, but that's what happens. So if there were items in that house, such as TVs, electrical goods, jewellery, cash, you would expect someone that's committing a burglary to take those. The fact that items didn't appear to be missing is really important.
And new forensic evidence casts further doubt that Mingsy disturbed a burglary taking place.
The perpetrator had gone upstairs and opened a number of drawers, which made it look like a burglary. However, the intruder had done this after he'd assaulted Mingsy. We know that because Mingsy's blood was on the stairs in the form of footwear marks, and her blood was on the drawers in the form of finger marks, glove marks in blood. In my mind, your average burglar If they're startled, they're just going to want to get out of the property. They don't want to harm anybody, they just don't want to get caught. Why would a perpetrator repeatedly beat Mingzi and then take the risk of going upstairs to see if they could find something in her bedroom? It just didn't quite add up.
By re-examining the post-mortem results, police suspect this attack may actually have been carried out by someone closer to home.
The nature and the number of injuries and the fact that they were all caused to Mingzi's head area is a suggestion that perhaps this is a little bit more personal. It's almost like a humiliation and perhaps not just a stranger attack or a burglar that's been disturbed.
Considering the nature of Mingzi's injuries, the police would have to consider whether this was an argument that had gone wrong.
In the majority of murder cases, there is some kind of connection between the victim and the offender.
90% of murders are committed by people who know the victim, and normally very closely.
As police begin to suspect that Mingzi could have known her attacker and that whoever it was had a grudge against her, they look to her previous relationships, beginning with her ex-husband, 33-year-old Wai Hong Sang.
Police contacted Mr. Sang. He lived in the Grimsby area. He was a chemistry graduate with dual nationality, so he was a Brit as well as Chinese. He had gone through a recent divorce with Mingzi, and they shared a son together.
Police want to know where Sang was on the day his ex-wife was murdered.
Mr. Sang was asked to provide a written statement of his movements on the 17th. He disclosed to police that he had taken the day off work.
Sang's statement explains why he took the day off and outlines a clear alibi for the time Mingzi was murdered.
He had the day off work and he went to Sherwood Pines in the Nottingham area where he went trail biking.
And he could provide car parking tickets and receipts to back this up.
With a solid alibi and evidence to prove it, Sang is discounted from the inquiries. So police shift their focus elsewhere, and to one person in particular.
The police, they would be examining who Mingzi had spoken to, who were the last people that had seen her. Obviously, in this case, Darren Grundy was virtually living at Mingzi Yang's address.
Darren Grundy would likely to have been the last person to see Mingzi Yang alive. He's the person who's in a current relationship with her. He's the person who discovered the body.
Mingzi Yang's fiancé, Darren Grundy, is taken in for questioning. And it isn't long before the police make an announcement.
Darren Grundy is arrested on suspicion of the murder of Mingzi Yang. He's taken into police custody, and the police think that they have their man.
All of Darren's clothing was seized and submitted to the laboratory for examination.
The police were convinced it obviously had the hallmarks of a crime of passion.
It's been 24 hours since the body of 29-year-old student Mingzi Yang was discovered at her home in the Lincoln suburb of Sinsel Bank. And police have arrested her fiancé, 32-year-old Darren Grundy, on suspicion of murder.
Darren Grundy was the person that reported her death and was also possibly the last person to see her alive.
He was taken into police custody, during which time he's questioned and the police seek to gather further evidence and information to strengthen their case.
Police believe the attack on Mingzi was carried out by someone who knew her.
Police were convinced that this was a crime of passion. It's not unusual with crimes of passion that the victim is badly beaten. Mingzi had been beaten and sustained over 20 injuries.
The hallmarks of a crime of passion, I would say, are extreme violence, humiliation, degradation, that sort of thing. Doing something that's really personal, so, destroying something that really means a lot to somebody. And often it is extreme, gratuitous violence where there's clearly been some kind of loss of self-control because it is such a personal issue.
Now in police custody, Darren faces intense questioning from detectives.
The interview of a murder suspect is different from the interview of a witness. It's far more detailed. The officers that interview a murder suspect will be specially trained, and they use tactics and techniques with the intention of getting as much information as possible. During the interviews, Darren Grundy maintains that he went to work that day and he was trying to get hold of Ming Si Yang during the day. He couldn't get hold of her, so he decided to leave work early, and he came home from work early and he found her dead in the home.
But police aren't convinced by his account and detain him further.
In order to hold someone in custody for more than 36 hours, the police need to go to a magistrate's court in order to keep that person in custody. So this is a serious situation for Darren Grundy. He's in custody, and obviously the police think that they have their man.
When police receive forensic results from Darren Grundy's clothing, the findings changed the course of the investigation.
When we looked at Darren's clothing in the laboratory, there was no blood spattering on there. The blood staining on him was quite minimal, and it's not what Andy would expect from the perpetrator. I would expect to find a lot of small spots of blood on the perpetrator's clothing, especially around his lower legs. If you imagine when Mingsy's moving around the room and she's being constantly struck, the blood is spattering onto that radiator. Those small spots of blood will also spatter back onto the assailant. Didn't see anything like that at all on Darren's clothing.
But then a member of the public comes forward with some information that turns the case on its head.
The Sinsel area of Lincoln is a very tight-knit community, and following the news of Mingsy's death, the teenage boy who was in the Sinsel area on the morning of Mingsy's murder did come forward. He reported to police that he had seen a cyclist loitering very closely to the back passage of Mingsy's address.
The young boy saw a man on the pedal cycle cycling around this area, and he actually saw him go into an alleyway, which is where the address in question is.
He remembered clearly that cyclist was wearing a blue workman's helmet rather than a cycling helmet. He made eye contact with the cyclist and then watched as he wheeled that bike into Mingsy's passageway.
But who was the cyclist? And could they be responsible for Mingsy's murder? The physical description the boy gives narrows down his identity.
This key witness reported to police the cyclist was also of East Asian appearance. The police now had to explore people who knew Mingsy matching that description.
And at this point, the police become aware that actually they've been looking at the wrong man. And they focus their inquiries in a different direction.
Darren Grundy is released without charge. And attention now falls on an individual from Mingsy's past.
The description of the cyclist matched Mingsy's ex-husband, Mr. Sang.
Wai Hong Sang had already provided police with a convincing alibi, saying he was over 40 miles from Mingsy's home on the day of her murder, enjoying a day out biking at Sherwood Pines Forest.
Mr. Sang has a solid alibi. He'd travelled to Sherwood Pines, where he had spent the day trail biking. So police are then tasked with establishing his movements exactly and whether it is possible that this cyclist could be Mr. Sang. In the eyes of the investigation, there is obviously a big difference between police suspecting that this cyclist may be Mr. Sang and may have committed the murder, but proving it to a jury is obviously a whole different matter.
In an attempt to track down the mysterious individual spotted by a local teenager, police trawl through thousands of hours of CCTV from across Lincoln.
There are so many CCTV cameras now, private, local authority. People have them on their houses as well. It's a real critical part of any murder investigation. The police will be looking at trying to find that person at that location or as close as possible, and then trying to find where they went from there. You know, where did the cyclist come from? Ideally, what did they do whilst they were in the area, and then where did they go afterwards?
And after hours of rigorous detective work, police finally spot the cyclist.
What it actually showed was that this particular cyclist, who was quite distinctive in description, particularly with a hat that he was wearing, was picked up on 40 separate occasions in 16 different locations in and around the Lincoln City area. The route of the cyclist was quite clear from the footage that he'd come into the city in the early hours of the morning, then made his way out of the city again.
The man is seen cycling away from Lincoln just after 9 a.m, around 3 hours before Mingsi's body was discovered. Detectives analysed the footage to see if the cyclist in question is indeed Mingsi's ex-husband, Wai Hong Sang.
One of the main difficulties in proving identity of someone on CCTV is the quality of the footage. It's vastly improved since many years ago when it was really poor, but you still do have systems now, for one reason or another, that are not particularly clear. They're grainy. You may struggle to identify someone.
With the identity of the cyclist still unclear from the CCTV footage, police bring Sang in for questioning.
The police will be looking at his background, his movements and his relationship, trying to gather as much information. They'll be looking at inconsistencies with his account, and it may be that he can't give certain information. So they'll be trying to build up a case against him using the factual information that they know and anything which can either confirm or disprove his account.
Under caution, Sang gives the same account he provided in his written statement.
Wei Sang told the police that he had gone to Sherwood Pines in Nottingham. He'd driven there, he'd driven straight there from his home address in Grimsby, and he'd been there for the duration of the day. He was also able to produce some receipts from parking in the Nottingham area and a petrol receipt as well.
Despite Sang providing receipts to prove his alibi, police attempt to investigate his digital footprint by looking into his phone activity on the day.
He had turned his phone off when he left home, which he said was the usual thing that he would do when he was going trail biking.
So what the police decided to do instead was to examine the sat-nav on his car.
And what officers discover reveals a major hole in Sang's story.
The inbuilt car sat-nav actually showed that he hadn't gone directly from Grimsby to Nottingham, but he'd driven from Grimsby to Lincoln, where he'd parked in a lay-by for at least 2 hours, and then afterwards had then gone to Nottingham. So there was a huge hole in the alibi.
It's a shocking revelation. Police now know Sang was parked up in a lay-by on the outskirts of Lincoln on the day of Mingsi's murder. Could it be that Sang had cycled from this location to Mingsi's home in Sinsel Bank? Police look again at the CCTV of the suspicious cyclist.
The analysis of the cyclist on the CCTV showed quite clearly, with the times involved, that he would have had the opportunity to have parked his vehicle on the outskirts of Lincoln, cycled into Lincoln to Mingsi's address, killed Mingsi, and then cycled back out of the city again, back to his car, and then driven to Sherwood Pines in Nottingham, where he claimed that he'd been all day.
This key CCTV evidence proved Mr. Sang did have the time available to cycle into Lincoln and murder his ex-wife.
But the CCTV footage is still unable to prove if Wai Hong Sang was at Mingsi's home on the day of the murder. The only evidence police have is circumstantial and unlikely to hold up in court. But then, forensic results from a search at Sang's address return from the lab.
The police submit various items for forensic examination from Wai Sang. There were items which were actually purchased after he'd separated from Mingsi.
We examined a number of items from him, including a watch. The watch, when you looked at it with a naked eye, it didn't look as though there was anything on it at all. So I think the watch had probably been cleaned. But in the laboratory, once we could look at it using a low-power microscope, we could manipulate the hinges, the links, and you could see that in between the links there were some small blood stains. Those samples of blood stains were then subject to DNA profiling tests, and the blood was attributable to Mingsy.
As well as the traces of Mingsy's blood found on her ex-husband's watch, further shocking evidence is found on a bicycle belonging to Sang.
The bike that we examined was a different bicycle from the bike in the CCTV, but it was in the car on the day. The initial visual examination of that bicycle, we couldn't find any blood. But once we got it in the laboratory with specialised lighting and the low-power microscope, there was a small blood stain that was located on the handlebar. Again, that was subject to DNA profiling test, and that came back blood attributable to Mingsy. So, from my examination of these objects, it was obvious that he has tried to cover all of his tracks, and he has done so quite successfully because we've only found these two small blood stains. We examined many other items from that individual and didn't find anything on them. And he's obviously done a good job of covering his tracks, but these minute traces left in these difficult to locate areas is what indicated that he was the perpetrator.
Wai Hong Sang is charged with the murder of his ex-wife, Mingsy Yang.
The police have circumstantial evidence. They have Wai Sang in Lincoln, in the area at the time of the murder. They have the forensic evidence that links him as well. What they haven't got is a specific motive or a reason why he's committed this awful attack on his ex-wife.
Police obviously believed they had their man, but now they had to prove a motive. Why had Mr. Sang chosen to kill his ex-wife?
33-year-old Wai Hong Sang has been charged with the murder of his ex-wife, 29-year-old Mingsy Yang, in the Sinselbank area of Lincoln. Having pleaded not guilty, the case is sent for trial.
Mr. Sang's trial was heard at Lincoln Crown Court, which is a very old courtroom in the grounds of Lincoln Castle. It is all a wood panel building. The judge sits high above the courtroom in a wooden seat. The defendant sits opposite in the dock, and witnesses give evidence to his right. It is a very personal experience for everybody in the room.
As any officer involved in a murder case, you always will feel an amount of apprehension before a murder trial, because no matter how strong the case appears to be, and no matter how happy you are with how the investigation has gathered pace and been concluded at that point, there's always an opportunity and a chance that something could come up during the trial that could change the direction of things. And even if it is a technicality or something that doesn't directly impinge on the actual case itself, sometimes that can be something that influences a jury in a kind of negative way.
As the trial begins, local reporter Richard Van Plu observes Mingsy's alleged killer in the courtroom.
Sang was very composed. He was obviously a very intelligent man and was following the proceedings intently, but showed little emotion.
The prosecution opens their case against Sang.
The prosecution presented a strong case, backed by the CCTV evidence and the sat-nav evidence, but it wasn't an overwhelming case.
The prosecution in the case were looking to show that there was a degree of pre-planning and preparation in this case, the way that Wai Sang had behaved, the fact that he'd lied about where he'd been, that he came to Lincoln in his vehicle, then came on his pedal cycle into the city centre. The fact that there were so many injuries inflicted on Mingsy Yang. was clearly a personal attack, and it was clearly something that he'd planned, and he'd tried to cover his tracks very carefully.
The pathology evidence presented at trial showed that the injury that most likely killed Mingzi was a brutal wound to the head. But the murder weapon was never recovered, and the prosecution suggested that this meant it was carried out by somebody with premeditation who had taken that weapon away and made sure that it wasn't found.
To the courtroom's surprise, Tsang agrees to give evidence.
As a journalist in the courtroom, you sit in a wood-panelled seat right next to the witness box, where Mr. Tsang gave evidence. And confronted by the evidence from the sat-nav, Tsang gave an account that he did leave his car in the lay-by near Lincoln. This differed from the account that he initially gave the police.
Tsang agrees that yes, he did go to Lincoln, but rather than going into Lincoln City on a push bike, he said that he drove to the outskirts of Lincoln, he parked in a lay-by, and he slept for a couple of hours.
And the reason he gave for not telling the police this during his first account was that he didn't want his new partner to find out that he'd been sleeping.
The prosecution confronts Tsang with the CCTV footage from the day of the murder. They are convinced this is Tsang heading towards Sinsel Bank.
Tsang was adamant that the cyclist in the blue work helmet was not him, and that he remained in his car asleep on the outskirts of Lincoln.
Wei Tsang denies being the person on the pedal cycle. He simply says it's not him.
Despite the overwhelming forensic evidence against Tsang, the court are yet to hear a motive behind the killing. But then, details of Mingzi and Tsang's marriage are revealed to the jury.
It's revealed that there was a history of coercion and abuse from Wei Tsang against Mingzi Yang. It's been going on for some time before they actually divorced. Domestic abuse is very rarely isolated. It's something that will often go on perhaps for years. I read a statistic recently that said that there were 50 incidents of domestic abuse that would normally occur before someone calls for help. And the victim will often put up with abuse or coercion for a long period of time before they eventually come to the point where they actually ask for help. Mingzi Yang had actually reported previous incidents of domestic abuse to Humberside Police on 3 separate occasions before she moved to Lincoln, and actually before Darren Grundy had come onto the scene.
In 2012, Mingzi divorced from Tsang and moved to Lincoln to start a new life for herself. The pair then only saw each other when handing over their son to one another as part of an arrangement made by the court. The abuse that she had suffered appeared to have ended. But then, relations with her former husband took a sudden drop.
During the trial, it was established that the divorce between Mingzi and Tsang had not been straightforward. There had been some disagreements over the custody of their son. And obviously, that is something that can raise very high emotions.
Mingzi and Tsang had initially settled on shared custody of their son. But in the lead up to that fateful morning, it appears Mingzi had put in motion plans to end this.
They shared custody, but the prosecution put the motive on the basis that he got a letter a few days before where she wanted more custody of their son.
Wei Tsang had received at least one letter in relation to those custody arrangements, so it's believed that actually Mingzi Yang was looking to see more of her son, and Wei Tsang wasn't happy with that, and this potentially was the reason why he killed her. In my experience, in a case involving children and personal relationships, it can be something on the face of it quite simple, and in isolation perhaps not as serious, that can send somebody over the edge. Could potentially be a build-up of tension and stress over a period of time, and the person just kind of snaps.
In January 2015, the jury at Lincoln Crown Court returns its verdict. Wai Hong Zhang is found guilty of Mingzi Yang's murder. He is sentenced to a minimum of 28 years in prison.
At the end of the trial, the jury returned a guilty verdict on the charge of murder. They were obviously convinced by the prosecution case and returned an extremely quick verdict for a murder case. They took just 2 hours to find Sang guilty.
Wai Sang, I would say, was a cold-hearted individual, self-centred, deceitful, and clearly very violent.
But with his cleverly constructed alibi, initially deceiving police, was there a chance that Sang could have walked away with murder?
This case stands out because the murderer prepared a very clever alibi before carrying out the killing. It is not unusual for people to try and create an alibi after they carry out a murder or a killing. But in my career as a crime reporter, there are probably only 2 or 3 other cases where someone has gone to such great lengths.
He's sat down and thought this through. He's obviously an intelligent person. He's covered his tracks. It just tells me that, yeah, he is that kind of cold, calculated kind of a person.
If it wasn't for the blood on the bike and the watch, although he is on the outskirts of Lincoln, it's not beyond reasonable doubt that a jury could have been convinced that he wasn't a cyclist.
The case really turned on the forensic evidence. You know, he may well have got away with that murder in years gone by, but fortunately with the advances in forensic science and the specialist CCTV that's available and the experts nowadays, he was quite rightly tracked down and sentenced.
If this murder had happened 30 years ago, at the start of my career, it's probably quite unlikely that he would have been convicted.
With Sang now behind bars, the community reflects on the impact Mingzi's death has had on her family.
It's so traumatic. She was so young and she moved here, she wanted a better life, but she hasn't witnessed the whole life yet.
I think this case is shocking in terms of the level and the nature of the injuries. The sentence reflects the seriousness of the offence. Hopefully it may bring some small comfort to Mingzi's family moving forward. But at the end of the day, nothing will bring Mingzi Yang back, and it leaves a young boy growing up without his mother.
In the quiet city of Temecula, California, the disappearance of Edna Rivers sends ripples of concern through her community.
Her vehicle was found in the Pachanga Casino parking lot, and there was blood handprints on one of the windows. There was a significant odor of what appeared to be flesh, a decaying flesh. So yeah, that really lit everybody up then.
So she was scheduled to work on January 2nd. She did not arrive.
I was very surprised at the demeanor the family had, from the kids all the way up to the in-laws, that this woman's missing and no one really cares about her.
When the authorities reach out to her family, their response is indifferent. They claim that Edna had a habit of vanishing for a few days. But those who know her aren't convinced.
And yet the family is just going on with their regular routine.
It's been 48 hours since the report of her disappearance, but there is still no sign of Edna Rivers. The clock is now ticking.
Temecula is a middle to upper class community located in southwest Riverside County. It started out basically more of almost a suburb, a commuter town from San Diego, Orange County, with the house prices were much cheaper at one point in time in the area. So many people would commute from the San Diego and Orange County area.
As a suburban community, the crime rate in Temecula is fairly low, and people just don't expect to have crime where they are in Temecula. It's a beautiful suburb, and people feel very safe. Edna worked in a nursing home and worked nights.
So she was scheduled to work on January 2nd at 10 or 10:30 in the evening. She did not arrive.
She worked there for almost a year and never called in sick or never missed a day. So for her not to call in or not to show up was unusual.
They described her as the type of employee that if she thought she may be late, she would call. And she was extremely dependable. So they were very worried when she didn't show up.
Edna's sister, she was very upset and very motivated to find out where her sister had gone to, because it's not like her to disappear, and yet the family is just going on with their regular routine.
Edna's sister, in fact, called her work on Monday evening asking if she had been there. But one thing that I thought was unusual about this is the sister asked the coworkers not to tell Philip she called. I think that shows the dynamic of the relationship, that the sister was even concerned to let Philip know she was looking for her.
Philip Charles Rivers was a Navy serviceman who was stationed in San Diego, and at the time was going through a bitter divorce from his wife, Edna. As often happens, even though a couple is going through a divorce, one of the people refuses to leave, or it just isn't practical for them to leave. So while they're going through the process, the couple continues to live together. And that really could be a situation that becomes a catalyst. A few of the factors that affected their decision to divorce was the fact that Edna would disappear for days at a time and go on these gambling binges, which caused a lot of resentment for Philip, and there was a lot of jealousy.
He had spent his career, most of his adult life, in the Navy. He was assigned to a vessel and was deployed on a regular basis.
He lived in a upper scale, middle class, gated community in Temecula.
But Edna Rivers is first reported missing by her employers at the nursing home, following concerns that she had not turned up for work. Police arranged for a welfare check.
The deputy who responded to the residents said she wasn't there, went to the school and talked to her daughter, Vanessa, and Vanessa said, we don't know where she is.
When the detectives went to that house to check the welfare again, but now the detectives went and they contacted the family that was there. They went into the room. They stated, "Oh, excuse the odor. She cooks up here with spices, and that's why we have the incense burning."
Several of her co-workers independently called on Monday to try to find her. Again, her house and cell phone, no response. Adults can leave. An adult can go anywhere they want to. This is not a missing juvenile. This is not what we call a dependent adult who has medical conditions. This is an adult who can, if they want, walk away from their family. They're allowed to do that. I spoke with one coworker who explained to me that she spoke with Edna on the 1st and explained that Philip had been arrested. He had done something to her charging cord to her cell phone, and she didn't know how to get another cord. This coworker explained that she had another charger. Edna came by her house around 4 o'clock in the afternoon and picked up the phone charger. To my knowledge, that's the last time anyone besides Philip saw her alive.
Well, we got briefed by the detectives and they told us, well, missing person, there was a couple welfare checks done at the house, nothing was going on, and they said the husband, Philip Rivers, was actually arrested. He gets arrested, I believe, on January 1st for assault on his wife. They were sleeping in separate rooms. She went into his room, grabbed a cell phone charger because he had control over the charger. That causes an argument. We heard that when we interviewed the kids. The kids told us that. And that ended up from an argument to him assaulting her. And she actually was in the process of getting a divorce from him. So she calls her attorney
and screaming and yelling on the phone saying, Philip has just assaulted me. The attorney advises her, hang up, call 911. So she hangs up, calls 911, and the sheriff's department shows up. She says he assaulted me, and she makes the assistant arrest and have him arrested.
Subsequent to that, his parents bail him out, and several hours later. So yeah, they're tight with him and the daughters, but not so much the wife. The wife is kind of alienated by everyone in the household.
They bring him back to the house, which was very bizarre. He was probably told, and procedure is, you just don't go back. You were just arrested for domestic violence. You don't go back to the same house, especially if the other spouse is there. The jail did the procedure where domestic violence, they end up calling the victim saying the person is being bailed out or the person is being released from custody, just to let you know. So she knew he was being released. He ends up going back to the house with his parents. The two daughters are at the house. He ends up calling the daughters, telling them, pack up some clothes, you're gonna spend a couple of days at the grandma and grandpa's house. So when they arrive, Edna is in her room. Philip comes in, packed up everything, and they left with the parents. They left in two cars, the grandparents, their vehicle, and Philip left in his car. They went over to his parents' house.
Their information was at first very tentative. They didn't want to really give a lot of information. They hadn't listed her as a missing person, as I recall, and that was a little strange.
Philip finally reports her missing on January 5th, and that's because the sheriff's department contacted him and asked him, where's your wife? We're getting a lot of calls, check the welfare, your wife's missing, she's not showing up at work, her cell phone's not working, and no one could get a hold of her. And he makes up an excuse saying, she must have left. I want to report her missing.
With a missing persons report officially filed, Detective Darren Gray reaches out to Edna's attorney, hoping to shed light on her personal life and the mounting tensions within her family.
I went and spoke with her attorney. He went over the details of that week with me, the phone calls that he received, the conversations he had with Mr. Rivers in the past when he called irate. He was very concerned about his client. He also gave me a copy of a check that she had given him for payment. With that information, I contacted her bank, which was Washington Mutual, and they were able to tell me there had been no activity from her checking account since January 1st, which was a big deal to me. Now we have someone who is extremely dependable, who has children, who's not been seen from, and we have no banking activity.
It is at this point that detectives start to prioritize Edna's estranged husband, Philip Rivers, as a person of interest in the case of her disappearance.
Well, we were hearing that within those 15 years of marriage, it was a rocky marriage, a lot of issues, arguments, domestic issues that weren't reported.
We were able to get access from her cell phone provider, and they told us there were no outgoing calls since January 1st. Several detectives and I tried going by the house on the 6th, and there was no answer. Spoke to several neighbors, and they told us that Edna was not there. They hadn't seen her car in several days. And so then a plan was made to try to contact Rivers on the 7th, being Friday. Throughout my investigation, I was speaking with two agents from NCIS, and they in turn were speaking to his command. We didn't know where he was going to be, and I didn't want that. Time was important. To number one, find out if Edna was okay, and number two, if there's a crime scene, we don't want the crime scene to deteriorate. We want to get as much evidence, physical evidence, as we can, so we need to locate that crime scene. So I had NCIS contact his command, and he was ordered to report to his duty station on his ship on Friday at 8 o'clock in the morning. He didn't show up, which was a big red flag to everyone. This is a career Navy man. Why is he not showing up? He ends up arriving at 10, 2 hours late, which is very unusual for him, with no explanation given when he was late. He was then directed to go to the office of NCIS, which is where I was located. Once he got there, I introduced myself and I explained to him that I was there for the purpose of a missing person investigation. I wanted to find his wife, and the best way for me to do that was to get as much information from him as I could. And he agreed. He wanted to help. He did not know where she was, so he agreed to speak with me so we could find out where his wife was located.
I was very shocked. I was very shocked at the demeanor of everyone, even the kids, that mom is gone. No one cared. Mom is missing. No one cared.
So I asked him to prepare a written statement for me, which took him about 35 to 40 minutes. And I asked him to review everything from the last time he saw her until today. At one point, I step out and I take a break, and I speak with some fellow detectives. All of this was, of course, coordinated. Things aren't just happening. So a group of detectives had gone to the house and spoken to one of the daughters. And she explained that her mother and father lived in separate bedrooms, and that her mother's room was normally locked. It's not now, and that the room had been recently painted and the carpet had been cleaned in her room, which was a huge issue to me.
As concerns grow and more troubling details surface, detectives secure a search warrant for the Rivers home. They hope to uncover critical clues which may explain her mysterious disappearance. What they find inside will change the course of the investigation. 5th of January 2005, Temecula, California. 49-year-old Edna Rivers has been missing for 5 days. Estranged husband, Navy officer Philip Rivers, has been identified as a person of interest in her disappearance. Detectives have a search warrant for the family home.
Well, once we execute the search warrant, the residence is empty, no one's there. We start searching. We go to each room. We find out, okay, this is her room. She's living separate. And we get that from the background from what the investigators are telling us from Temecula. So we go process her room. The room is nice. The room is very tidy, like it's too clean. There's some stuff scattered here and there, but it's for someone that's gonna just take off or someone that's just gonna leave, it's way too neat. So we pull the rug up, and sure enough, we find a big blood stain underneath the rug. After finding the blood, we start looking at the walls. We could see there's blood splatter on the walls, even though the walls look like they were just painted. There's blood splatter on the furniture, on the nightstand. Someone who cleaned up missed a lot of blood splatter on that. So we actually, okay, now we found the crime scene. Something did happen there. There's a lot of blood.
There's a smell that you get used to as a police officer, as a detective, of death. You know when you walk into a room if someone's dead in the room. It's in a sense like burnt popcorn. When you smell burnt popcorn, you know it's burnt popcorn. When an investigator walks into a room, you know if someone's dead or has been dead in there. And it was obvious when you walked in the house that someone had died in the room. And when pulling back the carpet, the subfloor was completely soaked with blood, which to me indicated she died in that corner and was left there for quite a while he figured out what to do.
So we continue talking to him, and we're interviewing him, and interviewing him very strong, very to the point. We have already enough evidence that we're getting a good picture of what happened. Why didn't you report her missing? Everyone's calling her, everyone's trying to find where she's at, but you don't really care. He says, well, she takes a lot of trips. She has a gambling problem. Maybe her boyfriend, she met someone at the casino. Maybe, he's the one that kidnapped her, and, he's making up all these different stories that, shine us away from him.
One of the things that really irked Philip was the fact that Edna liked to gamble. Not only did she gamble, but she would bring their kids to the casinos to gamble with her, and that really upset him.
He mentioned he went to Walmart in Hemet because he'd stayed in Hemet from the 1st to the 2nd and didn't purchase anything, but wandered around for about an hour. I thought this was unusual because why on a Sunday morning do you wander around Walmart for an hour and not purchase anything? He said it was to compare the price of a scooter he'd purchased his daughter for Christmas. He then stated that he went home on the 2nd. Edna's car was in the driveway, so he went to Pechanga. Pechanga is a casino located very close to their residence. I got him to commit to how much money he spent, what type of table he played blackjack on, things like that. Things that I knew the security people at Pechanga could find. And they were unable to locate him in Pechanga at all. And if you can't be honest about what you're doing on a Sunday morning during the investigation of your wife's disappearance, that's a very big indicator that you're involved in her disappearance.
Just days after she's reported missing, Edna's vehicle is found abandoned at the Pechanga Casino, less than 3 miles from her home. The discovery raises alarm. Investigators fear the worst, that Edna might never come home.
Her vehicle was found in the Pechanga Casino parking lot, and there was blood handprints on one of the windows. There was a significant odor of what appeared to be flesh, a decaying flesh. So yeah, that really lit everybody up then.
She was a frequent visitor at the casino, but they didn't find, she didn't have her card that she usually puts in the machine to play the games, to get those points, reward points. Her card was there, but she never went into the casino that we could find in the surveillance cameras, or where they could find the surveillance cameras. She was never in that casino at all.
It's close to their residence, and it's a big parking lot. It's a very easy location for a car to get lost. Unfortunately, the parking lot video at that time, is a far corner, and the camera was not directly at it, so you couldn't see who dropped it off or the time frame. So at that point, Central Homicide was involved with interviewing him, and they felt there was enough to put him in custody for the murder of Edna Rivers.
With Edna's estranged husband, Philip Rivers, in custody for her murder, it is a matter of days later that her body is finally located, 70 miles away from the family home in San Bernardino County.
It was a ranger checking the gates up in that area, fire gates, the fire roads, and he ended up finding the body out there that was probably dumped there.
Normally, once they were identified, San Bernardino County Sheriff got a hold of our department and let us know that this person was missing out of Temecula. And she'd been previously a victim of violence, domestic violence, perpetrated by her husband just a few days prior. Again, it's been my experience that we're going to look at the husband because of the domestic violence that occurred just recently.
With mounting evidence pointing towards foul play, investigators begin to put increasing pressure on Philip Rivers, pressing him harder, determined to find out the truth about what happened to Edna.
Sitting here thinking, okay, your wife is missing, you come home and there's all this blood all over the place and you're just not reporting it. And one thing he told us was, and I got rid of the bed that she was on. I cut up the mattress and I dumped them in different garbage bins all over the place. Yeah, during that time we were talking to him, I did notify him that his wife's body was found. He had no reaction to it. To him, it was kind of like, okay. He knew when we were talking to him as we were going on, interviewing him, he knew he killed her.
Once law enforcement got back to the residence and they realized that they obviously had a homicide and the number one suspect was going to be Philip Rivers, they got in and in that case they seen that new linens were on beds, new beds in general, just a lot of cover-up. You could just tell that a lot of significant changes in just a few days.
We look at him and I tell him, it looked like someone cleaned the carpet. Well, I'm selling the house and I need to get the carpets clean and paint the walls and, paint the room. And I said, and you started in your wife's room? From all the rooms you did, you started in your wife's room? And he's just kind of Yeah, and then he changed the story and says, I came home after I dropped the kids off and everything, and I went to go talk to Edna, my wife, and there was a lot of blood on the carpet. There was a lot of blood. Okay. There was blood on the bed. And why didn't you call the police? I got scared. I was scared, so I just started cleaning up everything. I ended up getting a carpet cleaner from Stater Brothers, renting a carpet cleaner from there.
Later on, I ended up receiving a phone call from a woman whose son went to school with one of the Rivers children. He had come home from school and mentioned the arrest of Philip because it was discussed in class. She looked at the article and read it, and the reason she wanted to call is because she explained that she was at the Stater Brothers when the rug doctor used to clean the crime scene was rented. While she was online, she thought it was strange that somebody would be renting a rug doctor so early in the morning when it's raining. The belief that she had as she exchanged conversation with someone else in line is, well, they must have had a big New Year's Eve party and need to clean up. It was something that definitely stood out to her. She was able to describe the two individuals as male. She described one as older, which we later determined was Mr. Philip Rivers' father. And it just stood out to her as this rug doctor being rented at such a strange time. And then later sees that he was arrested for this.
His mother was interviewed. Her statement was inconsistent with what her husband said. And when she got caught in that inconsistent or a lie, her facial expression was, she was shocked, or she was very, like, oh, I got caught lying. His father was the same thing. He was interviewed by the station detectives and then later re-interviewed by us. During that time, we found video of them purchasing the carpet cleaner at Stater Brothers. They went to Big Lots and they purchased a bed, a mattress. They were both together, father and son. Dad was like, well, I was helping my son. He was going to sell the house. So I just obviously went to help him buy the paint and to clean up the house.
They were all going to get together and sell the house. Yeah, the kids were going to assist, and mom and dad were going to help, and yeah, just regular family endeavor.
Someone who cleans the carpet doesn't stop to think that blood seeps down and saturates the backing and then will transfer to the padding and the floor below it. So this is not uncommon to find a crime scene with a carpet or a mattress or a blanket or some type of material that will hold blood.
The reason that the walls were painted is there was a large amount of blood spatter across the walls, which would indicate that she was struck multiple times. One blow doesn't cause blood splatter. You need multiple blows for there to be blood, and then the object just to strike again to cause the spatter. So this indicated that she'd been struck multiple times, and what we found out from her body is those are obviously head wounds, and the head often bleeds much more than any other portion of the body, which is why she bled so much, and there was so much blood in the residence.
He just didn't beat her one time, beat her multiple times with an instrument to the head. We brought in some chemicals to spray on the walls, luminol to spray on the walls, and that brought up even all the blood splatter that was underneath the paint. We counted the different casts off, so it was multiple times that Edna was beat with that instrument.
The behaviour of Edna's in-laws came into question. Were they more involved in the tragedy than anyone initially expected?
There's no evidence of him even talking to his parents, but his parents going along with, okay, let's go buy the carpet cleaner, let's go buy the bed, painting. I wouldn't know how to go about to explain how, I just killed my wife and, hey, Dad, could you come and help me paint the room? Could you help me clean the carpet? Blood, as Mom's downstairs cooking dinner for everyone. There's no words to explain that.
That was unique. I've only seen that a couple of times where my family members actually assist the murderer. To be involved to that degree is beyond my comprehension, to say the least. They assisted in every way they could as far as to cleaning up the crime scene. Very hard to think about how that even works.
You normally don't get your parents to help you cover up your murder. And someone who, again, is very well respected in his profession. He's in the Navy. He should be someone who can handle pressure, who can handle stressful, intense situations, and remain calm, remain cool. He was unable to.
I think looking at the whole investigation and, analyzing the relationship and how it got to the point, I think what happened was he was a very controlling person, very jealous person. Edna felt very comfortable at her job, felt very independent, that I'm a woman, I have a work, I could do stuff by myself. I don't need to be controlled by a jealous, controlling husband. I think that kind of built up as times went on, as he saw her get more independent, the more he wanted to control her, and the more his parents interfered in their relationship. I think that kind of had a big part in it, that she would try to discipline the kids and try to bring them up, as any parent would do. No, you cannot do that, or no, you cannot go there. I think they interfered a lot in that relationship, got into their business that they never got into. I think all that was built up over the years, and then her filing for divorce, and they were going through procedure, and him thinking, I'm going to have to split that house with you. I'm going to have to give you 50-50 in this relationship, even though my parents gave us the money to buy this house and also make payments at times when they needed to make payments, house payments. He didn't want that. And I think that the last straw was when she had him arrested for domestic battery on her. I think that probably just was the end of it. And I think he just, at that point, decided, I'm going to kill her.
It's clear that Philip had a temper. He admitted to the police that he had pushed Edna back on January 1st when they responded to the home after the argument. That in itself could be considered violent behavior, and it very possibly could be considered premeditation. We're left wondering, was that the moment that he began to formulate this plan to do away with her?
The motives for this could be multiple things, from just the deterioration of their marriage and anger, or another call I received that was interesting. I received a call from a real estate agent. The real estate agent told me that he'd been involved in the initial sale of the house, or attempted sale, which was stopped by Edna's attorney because Edna was not listed on it. He told me that he had tried to make multiple phone calls or contact with Philip since he returned from a deployment and had never received a call back. Kind of forgot about it. On Thursday, January 6th, he suddenly received a call from Philip, who said he wanted to refinance or sell the house, and that the court had okayed it because they needed money for mental evaluations for Edna. Obviously, this was not the case. The court did not order that, and we know that Edna was deceased. My belief was he was trying to get money so he could flee the country. The standard deterioration of a relationship with a history of domestic violence, and then there's the financial aspect that he couldn't sell the house that he believed was his. He did not believe that any of the house belonged to her, which California state law says that it did, and he really had a hard time with that. I think all that came to a point with the anger over the deterioration of the relationship, the history of domestic violence, as well as this financial aspect of the house and the divorce proceedings.
He did had some counseling in the Navy. Once they kind of reported that there was some domestic issues there, he did go to talk to some counseling, but we never were able to get exactly what they talked about. We knew that he went to counseling. That's all they would tell us about that. He didn't like the independence of her leaving. She would go, according to him, she would leave for a couple of days and not come back. So that stuff would bring a lot of pressure into the family. That was one thing he brought up, where, you know, she would go out or go to the Philippines for a long time and not tell anyone, or, you know, go gambling for several days and not tell anyone, and just show up whenever she wanted to.
As detectives explore potential motives behind Edna Rivers' murder, they begin piecing together a chilling sequence of events that took place inside the family home.
They're not usually whodunits. You had to prove that it happened. And in this case with Rivers, it was a matter of finding the victim's body eventually. And that was the hard thing to do in this situation. But we know that in the vast majority of cases, when a female is killed, it's usually the intimate partner who does it. And that's just what the statistics bear out. So in this situation, you had to put all those pieces together to show that she wasn't someone who just disappeared, that something happened to her. New Year's Eve is what brought this all about. Philip, I believe, was working on New Year's Eve and gone from the house. He had a 24-hour duty. Edna had a sister in the LA County area and wanted to take her daughters to a New Year's Eve party. One of the daughters did not want to go to the party. Philip's parents were at the house, and an argument ensued where the parent supported the younger daughter that she did not have to go. This argument resulted in Edna calling her attorney for some advice. In speaking with her attorney, Edna would often call for advice, and he explained to me that she really often had a hard time making decisions and needed support in making decisions. The attorney spoke with the parents and explained that there was in fact a court order prohibiting the grandparents from being around the children. They weren't even supposed to be in the house or be around the children.
Edna did get a temporary restraining order against the parents, and they just ignored it, and she never enforced it. She never called the police or deputies out to enforce it. They're there for a reason, and it's a good reason. It's unfortunate, though, that people oftentimes ignore them and still contact the person that has the restraining order.
This conversation between the attorney and Philip's parents resulted in multiple phone calls from Philip to the attorney. The attorney described Philip's behavior as screaming and yelling or disrespecting his parents while he's serving our country. The attorney had to hang up on him 3 or 4 times because he continued to call and was irate. Edna decided to leave the house with just one of the daughters. She left to go to LA for this party, and on the way there, she received a call from her sister. Her sister said, "The weather's bad, turn around, go home," which she did. She had some paperwork she needed to drop off, and so she stopped at the attorney's office around 1 o'clock in the afternoon and left the paperwork with him. That was the last time the attorney ended up seeing her. And she ended up going home on New Year's Eve.
On New Year's Eve, he gets an argument with his wife over a cell phone charger. She goes in, grabs a charger, that causes an argument, and that ended up from an argument to him assaulting her. So she calls 911, and the sheriff's department shows up. She says he assaulted me, and she makes the citizen arrest and have him arrested.
And he's booked into the jail, and subsequent to that, his parents bail him out.
I believe what happened was when he came back, he got the kids, had the kids go to his parents' house, and he drove over there, and he's trying to, he's now, accounting for all his time. He drives over there. His parents now tells everyone, "Oh, I got called into work because the computer, is something wrong with the computer on the ship, and I'm the only one that knows how to work it." So he's already making an alibi. I believe after he dropped off the kids at the house, was there for a while, he drove back to his house and he killed his wife.
One of his coworkers, again, another man enlisted in the Navy, he called me out of the blue and explained that on a regular basis, Philip would talk about killing his wife. That he wanted to kill her. He went over plans, ways to kill her, ways to get away with it. So he was definitely not in a place of a joyful, happy marriage when he was speaking to his coworkers about how he could not wait to get back to see his wife after deployment. Completely opposite, he was talking on a regular basis about how he wanted her dead. There were times that Rivers would make allegations he spoke with me and other coworkers that he believed she may have had a boyfriend or been seeing somebody else. There was never any evidence of that came up through this investigation.
Not to scare the audience, but how many times, let's say a month, do we freely say, I could kill you, I'm going to kill you, and not really mean it? It's something that just slips out of our mouths. We certainly don't have that intent. But when you have a true murder where a husband has followed through and you question the people around him, including his coworkers, and they say that he voiced this desire to kill her, then those words really come home and sink you.
He was found guilty of homicide, and he was sentenced to 26 years to life. Father was tried. The jury was deadlocked, 10-2 favor of guilty. He was already in jail for about 2 years, so they decided not to pursue him.
The grandmother didn't get any prison term. They decided not to file on her.
Well, in this situation, we had 2 young girls, and we had the grandparents who were obviously a dysfunctional portion of this relationship. And most importantly, they lost a relationship with both their parents. Their mother is, obviously deceased, and then their father goes to prison. Whether they choose to have a relationship with him or not, I don't know, but there's going to be an emotional toll from them losing contact with both of their parents. They're going to be now raised in a different environment. So there's just this ripple effect. How that impacts their life and all the people around them is what we never know. You throw a pebble into a pond and the ripples continue to go out and out. And a case like this is that rock in a pond, and it just destroys everything that it touches.
I don't think there's nothing she could have done besides going along with what Philip wanted, being a good wife, not having an opinion, doing whatever he wanted her to do, wanted him to do. Just have no opinion and just be the quiet little wife there. I don't think she could have avoided this.
But I believe that she really struggled with leaving her children. She didn't like the environment of the grandparents raising them and wanted to make sure she had as much custody of them as she could. And then through the divorce proceedings, obviously those things were going to minimize her contact with them, her time with the children. All of those things made it difficult for her to come forward with the allegations of domestic violence. She wasn't the kind to really be forceful in her needs. And I think those are reasons that probably kept her from in this relationship longer than she should have been in it. Speaking with Philip and spending much time with him as I did, I got the impression he was very calculating, very smart. And normally I would say he's not irrational.
No woman should be a victim of domestic violence. And she probably had enough of it, enough of being controlled in her life, enough of her husband being jealous of her going out or her being independent.
I think for him, the button was his wife. And who else can push your buttons but the person who knows you the most? And I think that's what happened, is she was able to push his buttons in a way that caused him to lose control. In other situations, I don't think anything like this would ever happen with him, but there was just this toxicity in their relationship that caused him to lose control. And that in no way is anything that Edna ever did. He is completely responsible for his actions in this situation. And that's not to put any of this on her. It's all on him, and he is completely responsible for this.